At 35,000 feet over Alaska, a 747 pilot sees something that should not be there. Two lights appear off the front left, pacing them. Not drifting, not passing, not falling from the sky, but matching their speed. Then they accelerate forward and shine so bright the crew says the cockpit lights up, and they feel heat on their faces. So they do the only sensible thing. They call air traffic control, hoping to be offered a reasonable explanation as to what they were sharing the sky with. Here's the whole story, and it's a crazy one. This is Japan Airlines cargo flight 1628, November 17th, 1986. A Boeing 747-200 freighter, no passengers, just 3 crew, running the long route from Paris to Japan, with a stop in Iceland and the next leg into Anchorage, Alaska. The pilot in charge is Captain Kenji Terauchi, an ex-fighter pilot and seasoned commercial pilot with over 10,000 flight hours. He has a co-pilot beside him and a flight engineer sat behind them. It's the kind of flight where you settle in, manage the systems, and let the hours slide by, until Anchorage Center asks them to adjust course. The aircraft banks, the heading changes, and almost immediately after that turn, those 2 lights show up again. Still there, still locked in, like they've been waiting for the plane to move. At first, the crew are thinking this must be military traffic, as Alaska has many military bases. You see lights out here, you assume there's a reason based in logic, and nothing out of the ordinary. After observing the lights for a few minutes, they come to the worrying conclusion that they have no idea what they could be. They sit at the same angle for too long, in a sky where everything else should slide, drift, or separate. The crew keeps watching, trying to make sense of this strange encounter at 30,000 feet, trying to gather information and not jumping to conclusions. But then the lights change behavior. They accelerate, they surge forward, then stop, then match the 747 again, like physics doesn't apply to them the way it should. And it isn't just weird, it's unsafe. Unpredictable movement near a flight path at 30,000 feet is extremely dangerous. Terauchi describes intense amber and white lights, almost like multiple ports arranged in rows. In bursts, the glare is blinding. Then it drops just enough that he can make out separate points again. The co-pilot compares it to orange and white Christmas lights, except these lights are moving as if an intelligently controlled machine, not like a distant star. The flight engineer describes an undulating cluster, like the light has structure, like there's something behind it. And then comes the detail that makes this hard to shrug off. The crew says the lights flare so hard, so close, that they feel warmth on their faces through the cockpit glass. So they radio Anchorage Center. Do you have traffic in our area? On the ground, controllers begin checking their instruments. They start coordinating. They contact the military, because if this is someone's aircraft, someone should be able to say so. Meanwhile, the objects shift position again. At one point they go from stacked, one above the other, to side by side, almost dancing against the dark sky. This is where the story starts to get out there, weird. The 2 lights pull away toward the horizon, and alongside them, Terauchi describes a pale, flat light, something broader than the smaller lights. A faint presence moving with them, like the edge of a bigger shape that's hard to gauge against the dark sky. If those 2 lights are the small part, what is the big part? Now we hit the moment that changes this from a sighting to an incident. Radar. This is where it stops being, we saw something odd, and becomes, we have to treat this as real traffic. The crew reports the onboard radar shows a return, something that appears, disappears, then comes back. Not a clean, transponder-identified aircraft with a neat label, just a definite radar contact that shows none of the normal traits of regular aircraft. ATC also reports seeing a primary target on their radar roughly 5 miles from the Japan Airlines jet. This object was also being observed following the plane. Whatever it is, it's not broadcasting an ID. No transponder, no easy explanation. The crew requests a course change. They bank right to create lateral separation, and they report it follows. So they try vertical separation, an altitude change request. If you can't get away sideways, you try up or down. And again, they report it stays with them, climbing or matching as the 747 moves. Anchorage suggests a 360-degree turn. It's a straightforward test. If it's a distant light, the geometry changes and the optical illusion should break, and it certainly shouldn't follow them. If this is interesting so far, hit like, drop your theory in the comments, and subscribe, because the next detail is the one people argue about most. Terauchi takes the jet off autopilot and turns manually. They complete the turn. And the crew reports the contact is still there, still pacing, still hanging behind them in exactly the wrong place. Then another aircraft enters the scene, a United Airlines passenger flight in the same general airspace. They coordinate light signals, flashing landing lights, to confirm positions. And shortly after that, the unknown presence disappears. No slow fade, no clear it left. Just gone. Japan Airlines 1628 continues to anchorage and lands safely. Most accounts put the encounter at roughly 50 minutes from start to finish, and the crew adds one more detail that people argue about to this day. During the event, radio communications were described as patchy, heavy static, broken transmissions, confusion on both ends. And the crew claims that once the object vanished, the static cleared and communications returned to normal. Now, once they land, FAA officials interview the crew, but the early paperwork is messy. Some details are incomplete. Early interviews aren't recorded in a way you'd want for a case this sensitive. Then the story leaks, and once the media gets involved, the story stops being what happened and turns into, who do we believe? The FAA's public stance lands in a frustrating place. They do not confirm a UFO. They suggest the radar returns could be explained as anomalies, artifacts, clutter, split images, radar doing radar things at exactly the wrong time. And they make something else clear in the way bureaucracies do. They will not admit to something like this being weird or unsolvable because people need to feel safe when they fly and that the FAA is keeping airspace safe. So the official outcome becomes radar split. The FAA's final conclusion was that the radar blips were likely a double image or a split radar return of the Japan Airlines itself, caused by unusual atmospheric conditions, and that all three crew members were looking at Mars, Jupiter, or lights reflecting off of ice crystals in the sky. The official explanation sounds as outlandish as the actual story, but that's what the FAA's final conclusion was, and that should have been the end. But it isn't, because this case sits in the worst possible middle ground. It's not one person on the ground pointing at the sky. It's a trained crew in controlled airspace, calling it in live, involving controllers and military channels, with radar behaving oddly enough to keep the argument alive for decades. Skeptics point to bright celestial objects low on the horizon, planets and stars, plus stress and a pitch-black sky that can absolutely mess with perception and distance. They argue the radar was never a clean, there is a craft confirmation, more like imperfect systems producing imperfect returns. Supporters look at the pacing behavior and say, fine, explain the matching, explain the surges, explain the proximity, explain why professionals sounded genuinely shaken. And then there's the detail that keeps the cover story side-breathing. Years later, former FAA official John Callahan publicly claims he gathered radar and audio materials, synced them, and believed it showed a solid object tracking the aircraft. He also claims a meeting happened above him, and that people from intelligence confiscated materials, warned everyone not to discuss it, and treated the event like it never happened. This is, of course, one man's claims, but it does add to an already intriguing story. What can sit with a 747 over Alaska, trigger fear in a professional cockpit, pull in controllers and military channels, appear and disappear on radar, and still end with the official system basically saying, we can't give you a real answer? Flight 1628 is a reminder that even with radar, radio, procedures, and multiple agencies watching the sky, we still don't know what really happened. I would like to add that Alaska has had many strange encounters reported in the sky. Around that same period, other crews in those skies report massive objects and strange pacing behavior too. What's really going on in those Alaskan skies? Because if Flight 1628 was a one-off and a mistake, the pattern should stop. But if it wasn't, then there could be way more to this than originally thought. Until next time, stay curious, and always do your own research.